Sometimes you are in the middle of an answer, the 2 minutes is exhausted, but the answer is not quite complete. So they can borrow 2 minutes, but only 3 times during the debate. If they say I borrow 2 minutes, that means they'll have an extension of 2 minutes, once, twice, and 3 times to the end. And we'd like to thank Saul Fraser of Global Properties, but also thank the media in Gambia. When we said, given 2 days, every media house in Gambia is here present today. And this, I think, is the way forward. Dr. Ismaila Cessay, we will begin with you with your first 15 minutes. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Haruna. Thank you for hosting this very important discussion on the successes and failures of Coalition 2016 and mapping a way forward. I also take this opportunity to thank all media houses present here today, but also equally extend sincere gratitude to Honorable Halifa Sallah for accepting the invitation and willing to join this discussion. I don't think there is any better person than the Honorable to come and discuss and diagnose with precision the coalition. I think everybody knows that Honorable is the architect of the coalition, so I thank him for that. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank him for his leadership during that very difficult period we call the impasse, by instilling hope and holding the fort for the runaway president. Today we're here to discuss the Coalition 2016. I think this is important. The political season has started. In 2016, after many attempts, political parties came together to pool their resources and their energy and their knowledge and their political capital to play the qualifying rounds. They qualified, but could not make it to the final to win the trophy. So therefore, it's important to know why, so that, because every Gambian, most Gambians, are talking about possible coalitions. It's important to know why the 2016 coalition failed, so we can learn lessons and avoid such mistakes in the future. Note that this is not a competition. This is an exchange of ideas. Both myself and the Honorable will learn from each other, and I believe the public watching from home will also learn from us. We will leave this hall today with no victors. I will not be a victor, I will not be vanquished. The Honorable will not be victor or vanquished, but I think every Gambian will be victor today after this event. Political parties should nurture the culture of what I call the 4 C's: to coexist, to consult, to cooperate, and to challenge. But when they challenge each other on the basis of the exchange of ideas that can help transform this country. This gives voters the opportunity to weigh different solutions to the country's very many complex problems and make informed choices at the polls. So I hope this will be seen as the first of many to take place in this country. I, for one, will not vote for any party whose leader doesn't want to come and face Gambians to tell us how you want to govern the country if you are entrusted. There will be no job for you if you don't want to come for an interview. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2016, in fact, before I go further, I'd like to thank all coalition members, not only the Honorable, for forming a united front in 2016. their efforts paid somehow, because we are here today in this hall to debate Gambian politics because of the sacrifices they made. So a thank you to all the coalition members. In 2016, opposition parties put their differences aside. They came together and formed a united front to remove Jammeh and initiate reforms that could put this country on a path towards democracy and development, in particular consolidate democracy and also promote the rule of law. To succeed and to achieve their goals, the coalition produced a manifesto promising to implement corrective programs of activities that were very appealing. But even though the coalition succeeded in removing President Jammeh, it is my argument that the second task, which is the most important, was shortcoming and it was a failure. That is, the agenda as published in the coalition manifesto and the reforms they promised to do, they were not successful in doing that. It is also my contention that this was a collective failure of the coalition members. The coalition established 2 documents. I think when you do some research, you'll realize perhaps it's 3. That's what they call a draft MOU, which was not signed. And once it's not signed, it's just a draft, it's just a memorandum. I don't know whether we can call it a memorandum of understanding. I think Honorable can help us with that. That's also called what they call the 17th October Agreement, which was signed, obviously. But also there's what they call the Coalition Manifesto. This was in line, or these instruments, these documents, were established for 2 purposes, or to help the coalition achieve its 2 purposes. The first one was what? To change government through peaceful means. And the second one was to create enabling for elections in a free and fair playing field. So what happened to the agreement? The agreement was fragile from the beginning. For example, there were fundamental provisions in the agreement which states that the person who will be elected as the flag bearer will resign from his or her party. The second one was that the person to be elected will give a commitment to serve for only 3 years and then step down to resignation, after which we will hold elections where she or he will not contest. However, the coalition members did not anticipate a potential breach of agreement and therefore could not create clear statutory or other legal mechanisms to ensure the terms of the agreement were enforceable. Now, the honorable members also did not test the courts to test the limits of our judicial system like Said Mati and his colleagues are doing, to take Barrow to court for a breach of agreement. Because for me, the agreement was legally binding. It's a written contract, and it's valid and therefore enforceable. It means that when parties sign a written contract, they are expected to fulfill their obligations under it. Now, for a written agreement to be legally through a signature, and as far as I know, and as far as I am concerned, and the Honorable can attest to that, President Adama Barrow, with 3 other coalition candidates, those who contested it in the convention, signed this agreement. I read a press release by the the party, DOI, on 9 October 2019, which states that, I quote, the strategic objective was to, that is of the coalition, the strategic objective of the coalition was to put an end to self-perpetuating rule by the voluntary acceptance of the coalition-sponsored candidate to serve a 3-year term and preside over a free and fair election in which he or she would not participate or give support to any candidate. Can you please underline in bold, voluntary? DOI is saying that the objective was to put an end to self-perpetuating rule by a voluntary acceptance of the person who was going to be elected as the flag bearer. Now, why sign an agreement where compliance is voluntary? That should have been a gentleman's agreement. In order to sign an agreement, if compliance is voluntary, and that is my argument. In fact, another top coalition member was quoted to say on April 5th that the agreement was a gentleman's agreement, which I also think that was in the case, because the agreement was signed. It means that you give your consent that you will fulfill the obligations of the agreement. Let me hasten to note that nothing was wrong with this clause in the Constitution, that the person to be elected as the flag bearer should resign after 3 years. Nothing is wrong with that. Because why? As in Section 63 of the Constitution, it provides for a 5-year term, while Section 65 of the same Constitution provides for the resignation of the end, before the end of the 5-year term. So even though you are elected for 5 years, there is nothing wrong in you resigning after 2 weeks or after 5 years or after 3 years. So nothing was wrong with that provision in the agreement. But it was also the responsibility of the coalition members to hold that person to account. But as we all know, no attempt was made by coalition partners, either individually or collectively, to hold him for account for breach of contract or for breach of agreement. Let's briefly look at the agenda, because removing the incumbent was one goal. The most difficult and most important was to govern, to change this country, change the institutions, reform the institutions. In the coalition manifesto, promises were made. They call it the agenda. The agenda was published, and reforms were promised to be implemented on issues such as education, health, governance, economic reforms, human rights, and justice. Now, some of the promises made in the agenda that were seen to be fundamental for the democratization process were not fully implemented. I'll give examples. Number one, the agenda promised that they will establish a body of jurists and competent personalities to review the Constitution with a view to cleansing it of all provisions which are inimical to democracy and the rule of law. What we saw was not that. What we saw was wholesale change of a constitution by spending $116 million, and it didn't get anywhere. But I would also like to give credit to Honorable who raised this issue in Parliament, but he wasn't listened to. The other promise was that in tune with Section 39 of the 97 Constitution,
2 minutes, Dr. Ceesay. 2 minutes.
2 minutes to go.
Yeah.
Of the 15 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, can I borrow my 2 minutes then?
Yes, you can borrow your first 2 minutes now.
Yes, so okay, then I'll have to move. But there was an agenda which promised to do certain things. Now let's come to why I think the coalition failed to implement the promises they made. One was leadership. The leadership that was provided during the impasse was not matched when it was needed after the impasse. What we saw was that the architect of the coalition, which is the Honorable, he kind of laid back a bit, and that left the coalition void of leadership. And I think every Gambian wants to even know. I take this opportunity to ask Honorable whether he was offered any cabinet post. I think we all want to know that. But also, if he was offered, why didn't he take it? Why did he opt to go to assembly instead of cabinet? Also, I think the coalition failed to defend the coalition members. Why? Because the coalition was undermined by a few people. I'll give examples. One prominent member was in Dakar and said that he had sacked another prominent member who was the spokesperson. He was sacked as the spokesperson. The other one was what? Another prominent member said that the president should go for 5 years instead of 3, and anybody who doesn't like it should go to the courts, and that was not defended by the coalition members. But also, when the first victim of the president, that is the Minister of Interior, was sacked by the president, the coalition members did not challenge the president to say you are violating the principles of the coalition, which is that you must appoint all 5 ministers in consultation.
Into the borrowed 2 minutes now, sir.
Constitutional coalition executive committee, but that wasn't even set up, and there was also no secretariat. So that was also a problem that happened as well. So the coalition was not defended. So we could see from the onset that there were power struggles within the coalition as well. Also, if we were part of the coalition that we would have had the foresight to plan for a legislative governance framework, which was not there. And it brought the argument of tactical alliance and coalition alliance, which rendered Parliament almost in a state whereby it was highly polarized, and today we saw what happened, and one of the victims was the Constitution. So, finally, every Gambian put their trust in the coalition to change this country. That is why we voted. We exchanged our votes for the promise they gave us, and then every Gambian also took part and helped the coalition that led the crusade. Therefore, collectively, we applaud them. But in my opinion, they failed to finish the job, a job that they promised to the Gambian people, and failed to defend and promote the interest of the coalition, and oversights and mistakes led to monumental failures with far-reaching consequences for our democracy. They failed to replace the bad system. They sought to change with a better one, and all the reforms that they promised either were not initiated or they failed. And all members are responsible for this failure in my argument. To move on and to have trust from the population, I think members should acknowledge that there were shortcomings, accept it, accept the weaknesses, take collective responsibility. That is what leaders do. When there is success, they give credit. When there is failure or weakness, they come out and take responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ismaila Cessay, Citizens Alliance Political Party. Now, Honorable Halifa Sallah will have an opportunity to respond in his view if, in fact, Coalition 2016 have failed the Gambian people, or was the success it was designed to be. Honorable Sallah, the floor is yours.
Every analysis must take context into consideration. You must have the point at issue, interrogate it, gather the evidence in order to pass judgment. Unfortunately, and maybe the Honorable Dr. Ceesay will clear that point, I don't think he has ever read even the coalition agreement. I may be wrong. But his premise will either indicate that he has not read it or does not want to fully explain its essence. The context. Here is a document called Opposition Parties' Proposals and Demands for Electoral and Constitutional Reform in the Gambia, 7 April 2015. This was sent to the President, to ECOWAS, to all international organizations. After that, on the 20th of July, 2015, the executive came with this act to amend the Elections Act. And Section 43 decided to increase the deposits to 500,000 from 10,000 for presidential candidates, 50,000 against 5,000 for National Assembly members, 50,000 against 2,500 for mayors and chairpersons, and then 10,000 against 1,250 for councillors. 48 constituencies multiplied by the 50,000. You can see that there was a deliberate attempt to make it impossible for the opposition to survive. And I will not mention the other additives. So the response of the executive was that it will not engage in electoral reform. What followed? All of you are witnesses to what Doi proposed in 2015, if proper research has been done. We indicated in our agenda 2016, published in 2015. And here I will be willing to give it to Honorable Dr. Ceesay, where it talks about strategy for 2016. The agenda analyzed that it was the deliberate attempt of the government to frustrate the opposition. And the opposition responded in 2012 by not participating in the elections, National Assembly elections, unless there was electoral reform. The presidential election indicated very clearly that the opposition could not remove the government from office by each political party being on its own. The result, 17% for UDP, 11% for the United Front. That was the result of the presidential election. The vote of the UDP was declining. Of course, the United Front was rising, but together is just 27%, which is what the UDP had in the 2006 presidential election. So we saw electoral reform to be absolute must. We called for it. We refused to participate unless it was done in 2012. And Doi analyzed the results of the 2012 National Assembly elections, where you had 48 seats, only 23 seats were contested. And out of those seats, you had result 80,000 for the APRC and 60,000 for the independent. Plus the 14,000 NRP, you had only a difference of less than 7,000. Showing that the APRC, regarding the popular vote, did not have that full control of the population, especially when we took into consideration that over 790-something thousand were supposed to participate, only 23 constituencies participated, numbering about 300-something thousand, and out of those 300-something thousand, only 150-something thousand participated in the National Assembly elections. We had 5 people who were not APRC, 4 independent, 1 NRP. So moving forward, Doi analyzed that if we are to participate in the 2016 election, we must insist on electoral reform, failing which we must build a coalition. So essentially, that is history. Now, looking at the coalition, in September, I was elected as a presidential candidate. We saw the temperature. The leader of the UDP was in prison. Gambians abroad felt that there was no way of changing this country except to overthrow the government. The government had decided that it is the power of the state that will protect it, because as far as electoral contest was concerned, it was going to win, hands down. It was not threatened by any opposition. The temperature was rising, and DOI saw the need to implement its tactical objective, to try to build a coalition. I convened a meeting at Kairaba Hotel deliberately, because any other place the government was suspicious of meetings of the opposition. And it would have been very easy, wherever the opposition met, to say, well, they are preparing for something else other than election. Because the person who was in power never believed that no right-thinking opposition would ever think that you can remove him through the ballot box. I knew very clearly that he will know everything that is happening at Kairaba. And by virtue of that, he will simply say, well, these people, leave them. That was the Achilles heel. Leave them. And we met. The beginning was not a coalition of parties. It was a coalition of the presidential candidates, and then involved their parties. 6 presidential candidates were ready to participate. For the sake of time, we all know them. We convened the meeting. Only 2 sent the presidential candidates. Rest sent their representatives. For 2 weeks, the discussion continued, until we saw an opening. Eventually, a group calling itself Inter-Party Committee met me and indicated that, well, they were interested in what was happening at Kairaba. It was very clear then that they could also be incorporated in the discussion. Another woman, I do not need to mention names, also had always been writing to the opposition parties for coalition. We saw the need to involve the woman in the second phase. And finally, I contacted Honorable Dembo Boya to emphasize the need for the organization we have established, the opposition parties for GOFA, that is opposition parties for electoral reform. Opposition parties for electoral reform, GOFA, to convene a meeting of all the members so that we can start the process of coalition building. That was done. We had these independent civil society representatives to participate. But ultimately, the answer to your question is this. The coalition started the process of being built on the 14th of October. We met on the 17th to prepare the agreement. You will question me about the agreement. I will show you what is there. All it mentioned is that we agreed to put the past behind us and come together to be able to have delegates, 10 representatives, in order to have a coalition building process. What was mentioned in the agreement is that we will have a committee on good governance, committee on national convention, committee on democracy and rule of law, committee on justice and human rights. We had committees. The committees met, made recommendations. We adopted the recommendation. These 3 years that you've mentioned became part of those recommendations. We participated in elections with the view to prevent the deterioration of the peace of the country. Insults everywhere. attacks everywhere. Gambia was in flames. We all know it. So the purpose of the coalition was to ensure that we bring about a change that will prevent Gambia from disintegration. That was the fundamental objective. The other objectives are collateral objectives, but the key objective was to ensure that we prevent Gambia from disintegration. And that succeeded. On the 30th of October, we selected a presidential candidate. I was a presidential aspirant. Why did I accept? Because failure to accept, the incumbent would have still been there. That would not have been a way of attaining our objectives. We decided to campaign on a platform of one Gambia, one nation, one people. And the coalition succeeded before the vast majority of people even knew what was in a manifesto. The Gambian people supported the coalition because they were convinced that where Gambia was heading will lead to disintegration.
2 minutes, Honorable Sallah.
So in that respect, if we look at context, there is not a single Gambian here who would say that before October 30th, he or she believed that change will come through the ballot box on the 1st of December 2016. Not a single Gambian other than those who had the tactical objectives of building a coalition. So I must say that in that respect, for the country to change through the ballot box, for the first time in its history, 52 years of history, nobody can say that the coalition did not attain the objective for which it was established. Now we must go, and through the question that will be asked, into the context of nation building after the victory. Why did it take the shape that it did? 25th of December, prior to taking over on the 19th, we established the fact that the constitutional legitimacy was the primary objective to be defended. Electoral legitimacy, primary objective to be defended. We defended that through the impasse and stabilized the country and ensure a change of power through peaceful means. That is the second attainment of the strategic objective of the coalition, to ensure transfer of power through peaceful means. On the 19th, the president assumed office. On the 21st...
Time, Honorable.
Can I borrow 2 minutes and conclude?
Yes, you can borrow your first 2 minutes as well.
So in that sense, then, we have seen that trajectory of a country changing without any looting, without any killing, without any war, no invasion by economic. They were received as forces of solidarity rather than force of invasion, as we have seen in 1981. Who on earth would say that the coalition failed in that respect? So all the objectives for which the coalition was established were actually attained. And finally, we had to go to the second stage, where the coalition needed another memorandum of understanding, which it never signed. If you want to know why it wasn't signed and the implications, the contradiction within the coalition, I believe that is what we are here to interrogate. But as far as fundamental objective is concerned, the coalition led the Gambia to change office to the ballot box in peace.
Thank you very much, Honorable Sallah. We have gone through the first part. I'd like to introduce Keba Kamara of Keba Kacha and Keba Kamara Kabefo, so that members of the press here present, please, you can go through Keba because he will be moderating the question and answer. Not yet, sir, not yet. But he'll be moderating the question and answer session with the press. So Adama, please provide him a microphone as well. But I think it is only fair that I give 5 minutes each so they react to each other's deliberations. Would this be fair, Honorable Sallah? Doctor?
Very much. Perfect.
Okay, so I'll give you the first 5 minutes to react to his deliberations, and then we'll have him also 5 minutes to yours.
Now, it is no surprise that I did not read the coalition agreement, because the coalition agreement, even those who signed it, don't have access to it. One of the failures of the coalition is that they fail to ensure that they make enough copies so that every signatory has his or her own copy, and it's nowhere to be found online. The only thing online is a draft, like I said, a draft MOU. If you read Doy's Gonga, the specific objectives of the coalition are clearly stated, that it is 2 phases. So I disagree that it has achieved its goal by initiating peaceful change, but not going further to create the enabling environment for an election in a level playing field. That is not going to happen this election. We still have a president in State House who is still using the power of incumbency. There is no new constitution, no new electoral laws, no new civil service reform, no security sector reform. So how can we call that success? Yes, they've achieved one goal, getting into the tournament by qualifying through the primaries, but failed to do good, to try and get to the finals and win the trophy. So what does that mean? They have to go back to relegation and start again and remove another incumbent who is using the same instruments, the same institutions, the same laws as the predecessor. So for me, that is not success. Honorable also, it seems like he agrees with me to some extent that they have failed, in the sense that he did not counter any of my arguments. Instead, what he did was to give context, which we know already. We all know what happened. And like I said, we thank the coalition for that, but I still maintain my position that they still did not succeed in what they sought to do.
2 minutes, Dr. Ceesay.
Before I conclude, I still like to reiterate my question to Honorable, that every Gambian wants to know, because there is so much misconception out there. The Honorable was offered a cabinet post and he rejected. There are those who are saying, no, he wasn't offered. I think it would be fair for the Honorable to himself tell us whether he was offered a cabinet post or not. And if he was offered, why didn't he take it? And if he was not and opted to go to the National Assembly, I think I really want the Honorable to answer that question for me. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with the question and then analyze further.
5 minutes.
I have said that the coalition must be examined in context. We've seen the fundamental objective. We are looking at the secondary objectives. The secondary objectives emerge from the recommendations of the committees. Let me just give you an example. The Committee on Good Governance indicated that the criteria on the tenure of the office of the flag bearer, that's why it said that the flag bearer shall head a transitional government for a period of 3 years. The transitional president shall be open, transparent, and accountable to all during the transition. The transitional president shall respect the views and rights of the citizens. The transitional president shall not support any party during the transition period. The transitional president shall not seek for re-election until after the 5 years after the transitional period. The transitional leader must be a unifier, good listener, team player, and easily accessible person. Each contestant shall make pledges to respect and uphold all the conditions circumscribing his or her tenure as established by the coalition. So you can see that the coalition was being weaved in progress. Imagine meeting on the 17th of October and drafting all these documents. And on the 30th, within 2 weeks, you held a convention. From 30th October to 30th November, 1 month. 30th November to 1st December, 1 day. Within 1 month, 2 days, you changed power that was mightier than any power ever established in the Gambia. So you can see the sequence of events. And therefore, these, what you saw here, or what you see here as recommendation, should and were incorporated in what you call a draft. There's nothing like a draft document. Something was prepared for us to consider. It was never considered. And all this were incorporated in it. And that should have guided the second process. That second process is executive power situated in the Constitution. And that executive power has absolute authority to appoint ministers, to remove ministers, whilst the governance established by the coalition would have required consultation with the coalition. You'll be able to get these documents later so that you see what was prepared to guide the implementation of any recommendation made by the coalition at the level of executive power once it assumes responsibility. You've asked me the question, was I offered? On the 25th of December, you've heard the president made a statement indicating that we were going to establish an agency for sustainable socio-economic development. The agency will establish an expert bank, and all Gambians will send their curriculum vitae, which they did, many did. And from the expert bank, we'll create clusters of experts on all issues of national development. And they will make their recommendation, short, medium, long-term recommendation, before the president assumes office as a start. And those ministers who will eventually be appointed will rely on those documents to start the process of governance. I volunteered to head that agency. The documents were given to some members of the coalition to vet. Eventually, we had a consultant, pristine consultancy, go and ask the gentleman, to prepare the template to create the database for all Gambians and anybody else in the world who would wish to be part of that expert bank. Did that happen? All became chaff in the wind. So do we say that is the failure of a coalition? Is the failure of the executive assuming office and beginning to run a government like a normal government? Eventually, it was not a coalition government that came into being. It's the executive presidency that came into being.
Thank you, Honorable. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I think the media is ready, but I'd like to fire a few questions to set the ball rolling. And I'd also like to propose, as many have also asked, that at the end, each of you may choose a local language for closing remarks. Perhaps use it to summarize, if you may. Honorable Sallah, is this reasonable? Doctor?
It's reasonable.
Maybe 5 to 10 minutes in the end, so somebody will speak a Wolof or a Mandinka somewhere so that we'll carry the general public along. Dr. Ceesay, my first question to you is, a dictatorship ended by the coming together of these political parties. We've seen the setting up of commissions. We've seen the National Human Rights Commission. We've seen the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We've seen reforms and change. And in fact, media freedom, proliferation of political parties. Will you not attribute all of these to success of Coalition 2016? If
well,
yes, yes. If no, 2 minutes.
Well, no to some extent. No, to some extent. The TRRC is yet to be ready. We are waiting. If the TRRC's recommendations are not fully implemented, it has failed. The Janneh Commission's recommendations are not been fully implemented. There is still fiscal indiscipline in this country. They suggested and recommended for 28 people to be expunged from the civil service. For taking part in sleaze, they are still serving in government. So therefore, the selective manner of the implementation of the Janneh Commission, and also the things that the Janneh Commission recommended have not been implemented, so that's a failure. As we saw recently, when we received these so-called COVID organics from Guinea-Bissau, a government official went to the central bank to withdraw 2.1 million from the counter, and the statutory limit was to be $100,000. So it means that for that has failed. Media freedom. It's the media that fought for it. Gambians voted. The coalition cannot take credit. That is why I think leadership has failed in the coalition. Let them come out and take responsibility as well, so that we know that, to be honest, they've taken responsibility that it has failed. But to be honest, I don't attribute the freedom to the coalition. Gambians came out to vote, and they voted out the dictator. And it was not only the success of the coalition, it is the success of every Gambian. So I wouldn't attribute that success to the coalition.
Thank you very much, Dr. Honorable Sallah. A lot of fingers are pointed in your direction to say, you designed such a beautiful document, the coming together, unbelievable that this was possible. You guided, you molded, you've written, you've spoken, you've calmed the public, you participated, only to withdraw your support and participation after winning. That, in fact, many say, is the reason why it's not fully implemented. The objectives have not been attained because of your lack of participation yourself. Yes? No? 2 minutes.
I believe we must distinguish before you establish a government and after you establish a government. The coalition is pre-government and post-government. I have made it very clear that the coalition ceased to exist once executive power was assumed. You started to have a normal government. That is the reality. And when you have a novel government, the president will consult, the UDP will consult all the other parties, PPP, etc., and say, I'm offering you this ministerial post. If they accept, then that becomes their post. Then to look into all the provinces, people with the expertise, and appoint them as ministers. That's executive presidency. I will not take account for anything that went wrong after the assumption of office, because nobody consulted me on how to run a government after that. That is the point. Secondly, we assumed as DOI that we could move into a coalition trajectory by having a National Assembly, which was Coalition National Assembly. But that didn't happen. And I must ask Dr. Ceesay and all the other people who talked about the failure, why didn't they stand for National Assembly elections? It was open to every Gambian to go and stand and be a National Assembly member because the coalition did not exist anymore. We did not participate as coalition members in the National Assembly election. Every single Gambian could have participated. Why did you not participate? To save this country.
Time.
To give clout to the National Assembly.
You want to borrow a second 2 minutes?
2 minutes, yes.
Go ahead.
So in essence, it is easy to indict, but very difficult to assume responsibility. I did not run away. I saw what was happening. I knew what I could do and what I could not do. And I continued to assist the president to the best of my ability in the decision-making process until it was time to go and contest for a National Assembly seat. And I went and contested because I knew that in that National Assembly, this is where we are going to serve as oversight, to continue to expose what is wrong and show what is right. It is now left to the executive to accept what is right and abandon what is wrong, failing which I can now stand and say, this is an executive that needs to be changed. And I will have the moral authority to say that. Now I have moral authority to say, this executive needs to be changed, there is need for system change, and nobody can question me.
Thank you, Honorable Sallah. Dr. Ismaila, everybody, well, not everybody, I'm exaggerating here. A few people had said, well, Dr. Ismaila Cessay himself is a product of the success of the coalition 2016. He's standing here today as head of a political party, which may not have existed if Jammeh was still president. What do you say to that 2 minutes?
How many parties were registered when Jammeh was in power? A few. GPDP was registered when Jammeh was in power. GMC was registered when Jammeh was in power. So Jammeh's being in power did not inhibit anyone from registering a political party. Even if Jammeh was in power post-2016 and CA wanted to register a political party and follow the procedures, I think we would have still registered a political party. So that excuse, that rationale, that argument is really weak, because there is evidence that parties were registered when Jammeh was in power.
That's it. Honorable Sallah, a lot of people also are saying, I'm sharing a lot of opinion here today, of course, that if you had any opportunity now, you, and by extension, DOI, may not consider coming together with other parties as a result of the failure and disappointment that you may have experienced in 2016. Yes, no, 2 minutes.
2006, I was made a NAT coalition candidate. Upper Salum, Lower Salum was supposed to be handled by some of the NAT members. One went to the UK, the other, after we fixed his transport, decided to move to the APRC. So if it is just sabotaging the progress of DOI, that should have been the end. But in 2011, we supported the United Front and had 11% of the vote to the UDP 17%. And some are saying, well, it is the UDP who enabled the coalition to win. But here, 2011, 17%, 11% for the United Front and rising. So essentially, in 2016, if you follow how the elections went for the candidate, I could have protested. You've heard all the coalition leaders saying, Dr. Ceesay is saying that, yes, a party has been registered, but where was the GMC leader when we were establishing the coalition? Where was the GPDP leader when we were establishing the coalition? All had left the country. This was not a safe ground for genuine multi-party contest. That is the reality. Let's accept that fact. The coalition has changed, has shifted. You see, development is not always planned. Sometimes it can be spontaneous. Sometimes it can be incidental. What is incidental to the change is not the plan that some of us had. But today you have a judiciary that can stand and say, this independent National Assembly member has been removed by the executive. Go back to the National Assembly. That is the progress that the country has made. For a civil society organization to say, 54 million, you have not done it according to the Constitution. To the court, removed. That's what we should take into consideration. That because of the environment that has been created, Gambia has indeed changed. But it's not necessarily a change of system.
Time, sir.
We must now move to the next change.
Thank you, thank you. Dr. Ismaila Cessay, my last question to you, and I'll have a last final question to Honorable Sallah before we go to Keba and media here. 2021, December is around the corner. Will you, via Citizens Alliance, consider coming together with other like-minded political parties? Seemingly 20 presidential candidates or more. We have 18 registered. We have 2, 3, 4 independents considering. Are you imagining forming some sort of an alliance, some sort of a coalition for 2021?
Well, we at CA don't believe in forming alliances just to remove an incumbent. We believe in being part of alliances that will bring change, sustainable change. Removing the incumbent is one job, like I've said. Changing is another. So we'll have to consider those things. The agenda must be right and genuine. The framework must be right. Policies and platforms and visions must align. Then maybe perhaps we can start discussions. But for now, we will not engage or take part in any coalition just for the sake of changing incumbent and replacing that incumbent with another incumbent, and yet there will be no sustainable development or change in this country. Thank you.
Honorable Sallah, you talk very passionately about system change. System change, system change. What is system change? And can you bring us system change? 2 minutes.
We've seen that sovereignty resides in the people of the Gambia. But look at our division into ethno-linguistic groups, into religious groups, into all sectors of society. That is what we intend to change, to unify the Gambian nation, so that we know that sovereignty resides in each of us, and collectively we must exercise that power to control the resources of the land in order to eradicate poverty, eradicate injustice, eradicate ignorance. The ocean belongs to us. Look at Batakunkusanya and Kato. They are mining. First Republic is like Gambia is just a groundnut country. Nothing is here. Second Republic, they discovered that. But they were mining and selling, and nobody knew what they were doing with it. Current situation, license, and you take control of what belongs to the Gambian people. We are saying system change means that what is there, the minerals, belong to the people. If you're going to give a percent, maybe 10%, but the 90% or more must be owned by the people, you will take that, put it in a central bank, into a cooperative fund, which you can now utilize to provide that child who comes from GTTI and has no means of production. You will say, here is what you can use to go and mill the coos, provide some form of processing. That is what we are talking about. You will utilize that to give it to the farmer, where you'll have the seed, fertilizer, and farming implement for the farmer, and they will pay back into the cooperative bank exactly what you've given them. It's a revolving fund. We are saying that you move to the person who also want to buy those goods to market, so that in doing so, the cooperative bank will give them with the means to be able to do the purchasing, so that they'll be able to sell. We believe that that process will create a Gambia owned by the people, resources owned by us.
Thank you, sir. Now I hand over the baton to Keba Kamara to coordinate with the media. Everyone can ask a direct question, not longer than a minute, not more than a question. And then you can ask a direct question. First question must be addressed to Dr. Ceesay. Second, to Honorable Sallah, and we will do it that way. We will not repeat or continue to ask one participant. So we'll pass the baton, ping pong, to each. So first question must be addressed to Dr. Ceesay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Drame. We've also seen some party militants here. I'm not sure whether they are allowed to ask questions.
Absolutely. I think everybody here should be able to, but let's prioritize media. It's a media event.
Each media house, one question.
Yes, sir.
Should not be more than 1 minute.
Yes.
Those are the rules.
And not more than a question. And
Thank
must
you.
be addressed to Ismaila Cessay for the first one.
Thank you.
Keba is coordinating. It's his choice.
Second question. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yankuba Jallo, Foreign Newspaper, sir. Sir, you have faulted the coalition for not taking steps to take the matter to court to enforce the agreement. When the Supreme law of the land, the Constitution, does not provide any base to compel someone to resign. So what would have been, why should the coalition take the agreement to court when the Supreme Court gives the president 5-year mandate?
The 5-year mandate is guaranteed by Section 65 of the Constitution, I believe, which says that the president has a mandate of 5 years. But the same constitution, section 63, also gives the president the latitude to resign anytime when he wants to resign, and that will not violate the constitution. So the idea was that there was an agreement that was signed that became a contractual agreement. So therefore, I see no reason why that could have not been tested in the courts to see whether there was a breach of contract by the person who did breach the contract. That has nothing to do with the Supreme Court. It's very clear. If President Barrow had decided to resign after the 3 years, serving for 3 years, he would not have violated the Constitution, because there are provisions that you could resign as president. So I saw no reason why that could not have been tested in the courts.
Young lady.
Thank you very much. Well, Dr. Ceesay. Yeah, I am Abdullah Dabo.
The question must be to Honorable Sallah.
Okay, sorry. I am Abdullah Dabo from Paradise TV. My question to you, Mr. Sallah, is the fact that the executive of the coalition failed to attain a certain goal or some of their goals. Isn't it worth saying that the coalition failed in that aspect because almost all the coalition members were given an executive post? Honorable Sallah, don't you see that there is a collective responsibility in this?
Well, what I have said, the coalition was designed to remove a person from office. It succeeded in doing that. To ensure a peaceful transfer of power. It succeeded in doing that. After that, we had recommendation as to what should happen. But that cannot be supreme, because you have a constitution, and the person who is elected would govern according to the constitution. I would come to agree with Dr. Ceesay that we have not fouled the constitution, because section 65 does say that the person can resign, and that could be in 2 days or 3, etc. I am emphasizing to you that my recommendation to establish an agency for sustainable socio-economic development did not go very far prior to the assumption of office by the president. If that has not gone very far, what is the use of me assuming a ministerial post when I was recommending something much grander? Imagine an expert bank where all Gambians would have been involved in managing the affairs of this country. If that is rejected, what is there for me in a ministerial post? The president would not give me a ministerial post, would not offer me a ministerial post, because I was his spokesperson. I had to demand for something. He would not know what I want. But I have to look at the situation and see what was going on. Would it have been moral for me to demand from the president that give me the position of vice president? Many people were saying, this is the man who should be the vice president of the country. Would it have been moral for me to actually demand for that position? What position should I have demanded for? What position should he have given me? I ask you people. But that president knows that my motive, which I declared to the Inspector General of Police when I went there after the victory, that the president, the incoming president is under threat. And you are the people who must defend the outgoing president and the incoming president. That for me, I told the Inspector General, he's still alive.
Thank
that
you.
for me, I have no vested interest, because I will never be a minister in this government. Because I wanted moral authority.
Thank you. Does anyone have a question for Dr. Ceesay? Here.
Thank you. Thank you. I would have loved both participants, but Dr. C. Okay. Yeah. All right. My question is, both of you have made valid arguments, and I want to know what your opponent has said that you agree with.
Well, apart from the fact that the first phase of the objective of the coalition had succeeded, that is, they were able to change government peacefully. I agree with that.
Honorable Sallah?
I have seen an attempt for us to try to have a holistic view of coalition prior to assumption of office and coalition thereafter. I believe some facts are missing, and with an analytical mind, if those facts are present, I believe the conclusion which Dr. Ceesay made would not be made, that is a blanket allegation that all of us are responsible for what is happening now. I beg to differ in that regard.
Thank you very much. Salute all. I'm speaking here as a citizen, not as president of the Bar Association. This question I would like to put to Honorable Sallah.
Sorry.
Okay.
You may do two, but let's do doctor. It's
Okay,
doctor's
very well.
turn.
Very well. The doctor said that the coalition should have tested the courts by perhaps litigating over the breach or alleged breach of contract of the incumbent. Dr. Ceesay, have you sought legal advice as to whether or not an agreement of this manner is justiciable, given that the Constitution stipulates what the mandate is? And secondly, do you think that the coalition, in coming to this agreement or recommendation, as the case may be, averted their mind to the constitutional provision, and also what to do in the event that the incumbent does not resign? Thank you.
I got confused with the second part of the question. The first one is very clear, but the second part I got a bit confused.
Okay, the second part is, do you think that the coalition have addressed their mind to the possibility of the flag bearer not agreeing to resign, and if so, what to do about it?
Well, I would not be in the mind of the coalition members, so I cannot definitely answer that question. Lest I'll be making hypotheses that I wouldn't want to do. But when it comes to the legal advice, yes, I spoke with a few lawyers to ask them about binding, whether signed agreements are legally binding. See, there are two levels here. There's a signed agreement. There's an agreement was signed that I, President Adama Barrow, agree to be part of this framework, and I agree that if I'm elected as flag bearer, I will resign from my political party, which he did. I will serve for 3 years transition, and I will resign and will not contest the elections after that. That is one. Now, the Constitution is clear that the mandate of the president is 5 years. But the same Constitution gives the president also the privilege to resign at any time he so wishes. So for me, I see nothing wrong with the president resigning from power to fulfill an obligation that he himself signed. I believe that if I was President Adama Barrow and I made a pledge, I made a commitment and I signed, and that's an obligation, I would have resigned to fulfill that pledge. Now, whether the Supreme Court would rule in favor of President Barrow or not, I wouldn't know, but for me it wouldn't have been bad to test the waters and stretch the limits and resilience of our judiciary.
Thank you, Doctor. Keba, maybe we try to get 2-3 more.
2-3 more?
Yes, I mean, I see a few hands. You may ask 2 questions, as long as you direct a question to each. I think this is possible.
Thank you very much. Yusuf Taylor for Guynako News. My first question is to Halifa. You made a very controversial statement once. Regime change. There is no system change. Doctor has highlighted that the second part was the most important part. My question to you, Honorable, are you now saying that regime change, which brought through President Adama Barrow, is the ultimate success? My first question. Then to Doctor, we've seen Honorable Halifa has run, tried, or attempted to run for president for a number of times and has not been successful, but he has gone into National Assembly. Will you be willing to do the same if the 2021 presidential elections are not successful for yourself? Will you be willing to do the same?
Honorable Sallah first.
Correction, when you say I've stood a number of times, I don't think that is accurate. I wanted to stand for Doi in 2016, the only time that I was nominated to stand for Doi, but you know what happened. I have never been a candidate of Doi, and Doi has only participated in 3 presidential runs. And that was 1992, 1997, and 2001. Since that period, we have been promoting coalition building. You've mentioned that I made a controversial statement. I don't know what is controversial about that. We see the poverty in the country. Go to the market now. What is the price of meat? What is the price of rice? What is the price of food? Is that system change? How many people? Over 500,000 young people come out of our school system every 12 years. What is the possibility for them to get work? Is that system change? I emphasize that the coalition was not designed to ensure system change. It is a transitional instrument to shape the constitution, shape the institutions, carry out the reforms so that we have a foundation for a leap forward. That was the objective. Even that objective has not been attained. My argument with Dr. Ceesay is that he is putting the coalition as a continuous organ for government. I am saying there was discontinuity after the assumption of executive power. That's my argument. And that discontinuity must be seen to be responsible for what is happening here. And I am not part of that. That's my position.
Dr. Ceesay?
What's the question? He said I didn't answer his question, please.
Let's allow him to do a follow-up, just to be sure that the point is clear. Keva, yes. Can we get to Flex? It's his right to get clarity. So we'll give 2 minutes so that he's clear.
It's simple. And the reason why I said it's controversial, the president picked it up, and it was a controversial issue. The question, are you now saying that regime change, which brought through President Adama Barrow, is successful? That's what I'm asking.
That's precisely what I'm saying. That you had Jammeh here. We removed him in peace. That's what I'm saying. That's successful. What bigger success is that? 52 years, your country had never changed through the ballot box. This was the first time in history for your country to change through the ballot box. You said that's not successful? That gave you a starting point. That's why the media is here today. You know what was happening during the impasse. My friend is here, Mr. Tal. He knows what happened. Gambia has decided. What happened? No, it's not about what you say. This is the mediocrity. Who will stand against arms? It's not about running away. The issue is that there was a desire to emphasize the change that had occurred. But the might of the state was still in the hands of a transitional president. And we changed that. And he left in peace. And that is what we must appreciate.
Dr. Ceesay, would you want a repeat of the question, or you're okay?
No, I think the question is very clear.
Go ahead.
Is that an assumption that if she doesn't win the elections, that whether I would be ready to go to the National Assembly? Well, I wouldn't be in a situation to make that decision now. My focus is on the presidential elections, and that is what I'm working towards. So I cannot be aiming for the Premier League and start thinking that about relegation to the championship.
So how many more questions, Mr. Durrani? How many more questions?
I think we still have time, so please, let's get a few more questions in.
Greetings, everyone. I have a question for Dr. Ismaila Cessay. I see him giggling when Halifa makes a statement about the Gonga, which is the economic corporate model of DOI. Mr. Sallah, Honorable Sallah made it very clear that the public sector is the one mandated, according to their vision, to be the trustee of the wealth of the nation. And through the corporate model, the public sector or the state would be responsible for the marine, terrestrial, and atmospheric resources of the state. Yes, very direct. Mm-hmm. I want to know if this corporate model of economic operation has been successful and could align with your economic model as a party, and what are the gaps in terms of differences? Thank you.
So there are three questions: whether it has been successful, whether it aligns with our economic policy, and what else? Are the different? Obviously, I mean the cooperative model has different variances depending on the level of the intervention of the state, whether it's cooperative is operating within a centrally planned economy or within the context of a free market economy. And if I understand the DOI's Gonga, they are building a productive corporate base, which will be obviously facilitated by public enterprises. Therefore, I think the Honorable can correct me if I'm wrong, it's about the state, a centrally planned cooperative system. Where we differ is that we believe in the power of the private sector. We believe in the free market economy, because we believe that the free market breeds competition, which breeds innovation and ingenuity, and therefore which helps the economy to thrive and create jobs. We believe that global capital is necessary because today we live in a hyper-economic world. The person who attracts, wields, and spends global capital wisely will be in a position to transform their societies in a very short period of time. So therefore, we don't mind having a cooperative system, but not within the framework of a centrally planned economy, but within the framework of a free market economy. That is why the differences are. So you could call CA perhaps socialist-oriented insofar as the distribution of national wealth is concerned in accordance with the principles of fairness and solidarity. But how would we generate that wealth? We want to create the enabling environment, get the right legal frameworks, build knowledge economy, build human capital, build infrastructure to attract wealth, diversify the economy from agriculture to services to marine, and you name it, to tech, so that we provide jobs for our young people within the context of a private sector that can thrive, that can create jobs, and that can also bring in wealth needed to invest.
You may borrow 2 minutes if you like.
I'm fine.
You're fine. Okay. Then Keba?
Okay. My question goes to Dr. Ceesay. Dr. Ceesay said he did not see the coalition agreement.
What I didn't want is happening now. I don't want all questions to be focused on one. Do you have a question for Honorable Sallah? If not, we'll go to somebody else and come back.
I think we've also broken the rules. The idea was that the media only will ask questions and not party militants.
Oh, that's a party militant. Okay.
So therefore,
no, Haruna, I think you said party as far as everybody.
Participants.
Yeah, participants can also ask.
Yes, but the email was only media will ask questions, the press, and not party militants. And not
but I may not be able to identify who is a party militant.
Well, they can introduce themselves to say, I'm from this media house.
Well, when you say it's only media house, we can do that. We can control that. What are we going to do now?
Let's have
so many people ask questions here and they are not actually from media houses.
Which has already happened.
Yes.
But let's respect his opinion of party militants not asking questions.
Okay.
So ordinary Gambians and media persons can ask questions. Perhaps.
That's a problem as well. How do we differentiate between party militants and ordinary Gambians? Let's stick to the rules, Haruna.
Let's go back to only media.
Only media.
I don't want to be accused of anything because we've laid the rules ahead of the debate. So let's stick to that. Only media. I think, Keba, you would recognize everybody from a media house.
So media houses want to ask again. Is that possible?
Well, if a fresh hand is not up.
No.
If a fresh hand is not up. Are there some fresh hands that didn't ask before? If not, then we'll go back. Can you please stand up? We're not seeing the person.
Yes.
Please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Fatou Samba. I work for the Gambian Talents TV. And my question goes to Honorable Sallah. A lot of people say you are generally angry, and that is why you are responding to every single question that people talk about you. Some people say you are childish to respond to every individual who says everything about you, including ordinary Gambians, and that will delay your process. A leader, let's talk the talk, walk the walk, whilst others talk. What is your response to those who believe that Halifa Sallah, when elected into office, will be busy responding to every Gambian comments made against him instead of working?
Well, I
think you said two questions.
I think that is what democracy is all about.
Let's go. Let him respond, and then you may ask Dr. Ismaila directly right after his response.
If leaders are not responsive to the questions of those people they lead, I don't know what type of leaders they are. If they think that they are above the people who elect them, I don't know what type of leaders they are. If those who are led believe that their leaders are above them and they should not raise questions and debate with them, I don't know what type of people we have. We are building a sovereign country with a sovereign people. People who know that leaders are not rulers. They are servants of the people. And they must answer to their every question so that they are clear on who they are supporting and for what. So those people who make those statements are entitled to them. I do not argue with opinions. I respect them.
Her second question for Doctor.
All right, Dr. Ismaila, the question is, you made 10 promises recently to the Gambians, and this is what you said. How do you intend to fulfill this agreement? President Barrow and the coalition, some coalition government officials or some coalition members made several promises to Gambians, and they did not fulfill it.
I think he knows there are 10 points.
Yes. So we want to know whether he will just make promises just like anybody and without fulfilling it. They said 3 years, and the 3 years is not fulfilled.
Well, I will not make 10 promises if I know I cannot fulfill 10 promises. If I had known that I can only fulfill one promise, I would have made only one promise. Because I know I can fulfill the 10 promises. That is why I made 10 promises. Thank you.
Media house. Journalist.
I can continue here. We've gone about just under 90 minutes, and for fair play, I have a question here. Maybe I'll go with you, Honorable Sallah. And the question really sent to me, I don't want to name a person, but it said, would you consider the 2016 coalition agreement as a good model for future alliances with political parties?
Well, the model was based on a challenge that there was no level ground for multi-party contests. There is no second round of voting. If you have constitutional reform where you have second round of voting, well, it means that all parties will be able to participate, and then coalitions can be built on the basis of who is the front runner after an election. But where you do not have a level ground and the incumbent is becoming more and more entrenched, then of course Coalition 2016 would be a model. But where you have a second round of voting, that would not be the case. But in the instance of the Gambia, we must accept that regime change is not enough for the vast majority of people. What people really want is an end to their suffering. So it means that the type of coalition that could be formed must be coalition that will lead to a system change, that will lead to addressing the needs of the people.
Thank you, Honorable. Dr. Ismaila, one of the cardinal and central components of the Coalition 2016 is civil service reform. What are your views on it so far, 4 years in?
Well, the civil service reform wasn't even initiated yet because we still have the same bloated, inefficient civil service. So no reform took place in that front. And that is why if you look at our 10-point plan, number one, we are promising to diversify the economy, to make sure that there is growth, provide jobs, reform the civil service and state-owned enterprises, and eradicate corruption. So we take civil service reform very seriously. We need to motivate and bring incentives. We need to set standards within the civil service. We need to ensure we digitize the civil service so it is more efficient, so that the civil service is supposed to serve the public. That is why they call it the civil service. But for now, it is failing in that front. And we need to reinvigorate and revitalize the civil service so that it is fit for purpose.
Honorable Sallah, somebody just texted me now to say, if you say that regime change is not enough, are you in fact not agreeing with Dr. Ceesay's position?
I believe we have agreed in one instance where he said that the type of alliance that should be built for 2021 must be aimed at changing a system. I don't know whether the person questioning is tilting towards that. But if it is simply saying that I was maybe implying that there was system change in 2016,
no, regime change. That you're agreeing that regime change is not enough. Well, now, are you in fact then agreeing with Dr. Ceesay?
I don't know whether it's agreeing, but I think I have declared this since 2017 that there has been regime change and it's not enough. So I don't think I'm stating anything new. I'm stating what I have always stated, that regime change is not enough, but in the circumstances, it was the only thing that could move Gambia to the next level. Without it, we would have been elsewhere.
Dr. Ismaila Cessay, is it fair to say that Coalition 2016 is a complete failure, given that without the Coalition 2016, Jammeh would still be in power?
Well, I think we need to understand that Jammeh being in power is not the issue. It's about changing Jammeh and bringing someone who will do things differently, who will change and transform the country that Jammeh did not do. As we speak, we are going for elections in a couple of months' time. We still don't have term limits in the Constitution, and that was why we are calling for electoral. This creates jobs, and it also helps formalize the very large informal economy. So my argument is that the civil service is too big. It is not fit for purpose. We need to find a way to streamline it, to make it more effective by also bringing what they call a confluence of the civil service and technology to bring more efficiency.
Does that answer the question, Honorable?
Well, it doesn't. I'm in fact wondering. The issue he mentioned is that you will retrench, retrain, and then put them back there. So it means that
reintegrate means that take them to other places where they can be more productive.
So the problem is not because it's big, it's because they are not trained. You believe that you need further training.
For clarity, are we talking about quantity or quality?
That is what I'm saying.
I think yes, that's the issue.
Let's find a convergence
here. Yes,
here.
that's what it is.
If it's bloated, are you saying it's so many incompetent people?
Not incompetent,
so
but some people who are not serving any purpose in the civil service must be removed from the civil service and they train for other sectors. There are other sectors that need people. Today, as we speak, in our 10-point plan, we made a pledge that we are going to provide 100,000 jobs within 5 years. Now the Gambia has the potential to tap the power of the services sector. If you look at the Gambia's position, it is strategically located, similar to Djibouti along the Red Sea, just that Djibouti is inside Ethiopia, and today they are one of the most vibrant maritime service industries. Now, Gambia today, we can bring innovative solutions and new products to really increase tourist arrivals from roughly 200,000 to 1 million tourists.
Is your issue here about quality at the same time? And the numbers, both of them.
We need quality.
So we need to train and equip and qualify.
Of course. So because it's
and
supposed to serve
then also cut the numbers down and send a lot of people to the private sector.
But that is why we are saying civil service reform.
Does that answer your question, Honorable?
Overall.
In fact, I'm getting more and more confused, because what I'm beginning to question is whether really the plan is to eradicate poverty in the Gambia. What I am beginning to hear is increasing really. If you look at the pay that the civil servants are receiving now, and you look at the package, and with that you believe that you are going to reduce, and you expect that you are saving something that will facilitate greater development.
But the purpose of reduction is not to save.
Let him complete. Let him complete, sir. Right. Let him complete. Go ahead, sir.
So essentially, what I'm being told is that there is no answer to the poverty of the country. And if that is added to the whole issue that you are bringing a free market, where is the free market in the Gambia? For 56 years, every government aimed to build a free market. How many people are actually earning to have business in this country that can employ the type of population that he's talking about? Where is the free market in the Gambia?
Can I ask a question to the Honorable?
Yes. No, you may answer. You may answer. Where is the free market?
The free market is existing. It's just that its potential has not been maximized because the enabling environment was not created by the government, but by previous governments. We did not build human capital, which is a prerequisite to have a vibrant free market system that brings in wealth. We did not build the relevant infrastructure, which is a prerequisite. We did not also get the right legal frameworks to fight corruption so that investors can have confidence in the market and bring in global wealth. So you don't blame the free market for that. You blame the ineffective, corrupt, and inefficient governments for that, and not the free market itself.
So where will these people invest when they come? Do you see the land? Are they going to invest in land?
Well, there are many sectors. Investors
like
decide where
which
they
sector,
want.
for example?
Services sector, in the agricultural sector.
Service, you already have AfriShell, you have all these
telecommunication system. There is communication, there is tourism, there is tech.
Let's allow him to respond.
Yeah. There is tourism, there is tech, there is banking, there is insurance. So the service sector is not all about telecommunications.
You see, the service sector is a sector which employs very few because of high tech. Any efficient service sector will not be talking about increasing employment. It's not a sector that employs. It's a sector that relies on technology. It replaces human beings. That is the reality. So the service sector is necessary. The private sector is necessary, but the private sector in this country cannot grow to a level where you can have eradication of poverty. The difference between Gambia and Sweden and Norway, etc., you had a private sector that blossomed to a point that you can tax the private sector in order to provide for those who are not employed, in order to provide for those who have more children, in order to provide those who are all elderly, so you can provide social welfare. But the difference between those countries and this country is that we do not have a private sector to tax because they are already overtaxed. And you cannot do anything to that private sector to be able to provide what you need to deal with poverty. So what we are saying is that yes, you have consumption-based welfare for countries that have big private sector to tax. But you must have production-based welfare for countries that do not have that. And that's why you must have a cooperative bank in order to provide that resource that the farmer needs, farming implement fertilizer, so that they will be able to. That's the type of
what the Honorable Doctor, we'll give you 2 minutes to respond. We'll give you 2 minutes to respond. So we conclude this. Then your question to him.
Yeah,
2 minutes to respond.
No,
then you ask your question.
No, but he owes me a question. He asked me a question and I answered.
No, that's what I mean.
Yeah. All right, okay,
you will take 2 minutes now, so that we'll conclude this point.
Yeah.
And then you ask him a direct question.
In my 2 minutes?
No. After your 2 minutes, you can ask him a direct question.
All right, that's fine.
Yes.
What I'm trying to say is that the system that he's talking about, that Doi is talking about, as in the Gonga, has been tried elsewhere and it has failed. I think the system that they are saying is a repackaged communism of the 21st century. It cannot work, it has not worked, it has failed. Countries that are able to transform their societies within a very short period of time relied on the expansion of the private sector and attracting global capital. The Rwandas, the South Africas, after apartheid, Mandela himself, who at once was very left-wing leaning, in fact befriending Fidel Castro, when he became president, he changed course and started orienting South Africa towards private sector-led growth. Even China, how did they really fight poverty and fight poverty and bringing hundreds of millions of people out of poverty within a very short period of time? Is because they were able to learn the wisdom that too much government, central planning has been tried and it has failed. In Cuba, it has failed. In North Korea, it has failed. In the Soviet Union, it has failed and failed and failed, and it did not work. And my question is, can the Honorable tell me one country where the cooperative system was used and poverty was eradicated within a very short period of time?
The country where he studied, the country where he lived, the country that educated him. Today, Norway has what you call sovereign national wealth. The oil money of Norway, the oil money of Norway is why poverty is eradicated in Norway, because that money is sovereign national wealth. That is what is meant by sovereign national wealth. The type of logic that you have is not based on fact. It's based on fiction. Because if you look at the countries you have mentioned, where the Soviet Union, all these countries, those countries are still prospering to a certain degree
because of shock therapy.
Based on the conditions,
from communism to
based on the foundations they have established.
Allow him.
Because based on the foundations they have established. And now those foundations had failed in certain respects, and as a result you can see the impact. But it is very clear that whether in the Middle East, in the Arab countries, whether in Norway, other countries, in the Scandinavian countries, sovereign national wealth is the basis of eradication of poverty in this world. Whether in China, all the countries, whether in any country that you have mentioned, anywhere you do not have sovereign national wealth, it is not possible to sustain development. That is the emphasis. And what you are saying, you are just name calling. We are saying from the ocean, how many vessels could we have put in the ocean by now? How many licensed vessels do we have? How much have they paid? How many have we captured and taken to the bank, to the courts? All that, you could have bought fishing vessels and they would have been plying our waters and bringing resources to the nation and putting it in a bank, and the cooperative banking system would have taken root, and you would have been sending our children from GTTI into the productive base, from the farm into the productive base, women from the garden into the productive base. That is the way of the future. Nobody is saying exclude a private sector. The private sector has its place in order to take money from the banking system in order to invest in that productive base. Yes, let me borrow my, yes, the private sector at this moment, 1.6 billion, which is almost over 60-something thousand million dollars, is actually what is traded in foreign currency in our banking system. But where is it in our productive base? That is the role of the private sector. Government has no role in owning, for example, a hotel, Ocean Bay Hotel and all this owned by Social Security. That's not the purpose of government. That should go into the hands of the private sector. That's where the private sector should invest. But the land that our people own, you give it to foreign investors to take over your land, employ your women to go and work there for pittance, and they export and make billions. Is that the type of system he's talking about? We are saying if Doi was in charge of this country, not a single land will be sold by the government. Everything will go in the hands of the Gambian people in terms of ensuring that the Gambian people work for their development. That's what we are talking about. The gardens in Kafute, etc., should be owned by our own people, and the cooperative bank will assist them to be able to get the resources to be able to produce.
Thank you.
That's what we are talking about.
Doctor, yeah, is your question actually answered? Yes, but also is your question answered?
Because I got confused because the system is so vague that I got confused. Because why? Because Norway did not build their sovereign wealth through a centrally planned cooperative system, but by tapping into their oil industries. And Sweden did not build their sovereign wealth through a centrally planned cooperative system, but by having what they call the mixed economy, where the state allows free enterprise and innovation and ingenuity, but also the state also comes in to ensure that the market is regulated. But also when it comes to labor, Honorable mentioned that we cannot allow our people to be exploited and paid less than the value of their labor because investors are coming. That depends on the government in power. Once a serious government put the right regulatory frameworks in place, the right laws, the right labor laws, no investor will come and exploit our people, because when you come to invest in the Gambia, you will work within the framework of our laws, environmental laws, our labor laws, but also in a free market economy, there's nothing wrong. And nobody is saying that all our land will be owned by foreigners. There are young Gambians who can also invest in the Gambia, own land, own fishing trawlers. Haruna, it has been tried and tried and tried. When governments go into business, they fail because governments are not good at doing business. They are good at making the right regulatory frameworks so that money is created and that wealth government uses it through taxes or other means to invest it in people, schools, water, electricity, roads, and healthcare.
Honorable Sallah, you want to react?
How are you getting money from the Saudi fund, Kuwaiti fund, and all these funds in the Middle East? You mean all those investments in oil is owned by private owners outside, or is it really in the hands of the Saudi and other governments? Do you know how those people manage and accumulate wealth? You're saying Norway does not accumulate sovereign national wealth.
I did not say that. I did not say that. I said they made their sovereign national wealth not through a centrally planned cooperative system, but by tapping down their wealth, their oil resources.
Their oil money is going where?
It's going to a sovereign wealth. That's how they made.
Who is in control of the sovereign wealth?
The state.
Well, what are you talking about?
No.
What are you talking about? Let's be honest.
No. It's very clear. What I'm saying is, Saruna.
No, what you are saying is not clear. You are trying to.
It's about how it is created. That is what the difference is. How is wealth created? Gonga is saying that the wealth can be created through a cooperative, centrally planned cooperative system. We are saying that we don't believe that. We don't believe in that. We don't think that has succeeded elsewhere. Wealth can be created.
Who is saying centrally planned system? Those are your words, because you want to give an image. That is the image, and let's be open. We are saying currently the central bank is the depository of the consolidated fund of the nation. What is there is tax money, loans and grants. That has not enabled the country to build its productive base. We are saying, if you want to build the roads that you're talking about, the infrastructure you're talking about, where are you going to get the money? That is the fundamental question.
There are many ways in which you can get the money.
Where?
For example, if you create the right environment, you can tap into bonds.
You can tap into what?
Into bonds. For example, if the Gambia had the right framework, the right environment, diaspora bonds are there. There is global capital whereby investors can come. There are public-private partnerships to invest in the infrastructure sector to build roads and bridges. But also, there is nothing wrong with what America is doing now. Today, they are going to invest $500 billion to build roads, to build bridges, to build car charging stations. But these are also, they are making money from global bonds. So for me, I don't think that money should be made through the centrally planned cooperative system, but there is funds out there through the public sector, through trade, through services to make money, and this money can be invested in infrastructure.
Okay, the question again. We have the central bank. It depends on tax, grants, and loans. Where are you going to tap money to put in that central bank to build your roads? You are saying float more bonds, have more treasury bills, borrow more. That's what you are saying. If you borrow, you must pay.
Of course.
How are you going to pay? Where are you going to get the money to pay?
By making sure that you diversify the economy and expand your revenue base. Because right now our revenue base is contracted. Our agriculture sector is not properly, the potential is not properly tapped. Our ports, our state-owned enterprises are not really bringing dividend to government. So it's not the problem of the central bank. It's about we've not been able to diversify our economy, tap into those sectors that can bring us the funds that we need. Like the agricultural sector, it is underperforming. We are doing subsistence farming and seasonal farming. Our tourism sector is not bringing what it's supposed to bring. We are doing seasonal tourism. We have the marine resources, which is not also bringing money. So it's about coming with the right ideas and innovative ideas to make sure that we diversify our economy and make sure that we also tap wealth from other sources through taxation, through investments in agriculture, investments in services to bring in money.
You are simply saying the same thing again. You are saying loans and loans and loans. Bonds is nothing.
No.
But well, what is bond? Can you explain bond?
No, it's not. This is not an economic class.
Well, yes, it's important for it.
No.
But what I'm saying is, America now,
for clarity, for purpose of clarity,
America now rely on bonds, and what China has simply done to come to Gambia, establish a state construction company during Jawara's time, build your state house, build the Supreme Court building, build your stadium, you pay, they deposit it in the bank in Britain or US, and generate resources from that, and then invest in the American bond market, because America is a country of last resort, where all these people will deposit their money, and the American government can rely on bonds to be able to provide infrastructure. But we are talking about Gambia. We're talking about Gambia, not America. So the issue here is, where are you going to tap the resources other than loans? You are talking about bond, it's nothing but loan. Treasury bill is loan from government, it's domestic borrowing.
Through foreign direct investment, through foreign portfolio investments. This can happen in the Gambia, and it's happening because with the Gambia today, our FDI is very small because we did not create the right environment. Other countries are tapping into FDI. That is why I said that we live in a highly hyper economy, and countries that are able to create the right environment to attract global wealth, wield it and use it wisely, are able to transform very quickly.
Okay, let's say you've attracted the global wealth. How will it reach it farmer?
This will be your
last
on this, and we'll give him his last, then we'll proceed. I think we're rumbling now.
How will your global wealth reach the farmer?
Well,
to provide seed, fertilizer, and farming implement to the farmer.
What we are saying is that we have to move away from the kind of farming we are talking about, giving hose and fertilizer to farmers. That is a cooperative system whereby you say you create a cooperative and give hose, and we are going to mechanize agriculture, where we use machines and new knowledge for agriculture. And this can be only done by attracting foreign direct investment to invest in the agricultural sector.
You hear some of them clapping for you? But let them answer the question with you. We have farmers now without fertilizer, farming implements and seed. You want to mechanize. How will you get that to them? You are going to give it to them free of charge? Are you going to sell it to them?
Well, that is the difference, is that we cannot.
How will you do that?
Your question is vague.
It's not vague.
It's very vague.
How will you get resources to the farmer to produce?
That is up to the farmer. If anybody wants to get into agriculture, what we do is to provide access to finance to do agriculture.
Access
we
to
try to
finance.
give people money and farming.
May we bring this house in order? Let's bring the house in order, gentlemen. House in order. House in order. House in order. Honorable Sallah, a question for you from Mohammed Tex Kanyi, I think. It says, there is no doubt that Coalition 2016 registered a number of successes, which includes regime change. However, should and can any individual partner of Coalition 2016, in this case PDOIS, take glory of authenticating responsibility for the failures? If yes, why? If no, why?
I've said that Coalition 2016 developed in stages. The first stage of ensuring peaceful transfer of power is what we participated in. That's obvious to everybody. The second phase of the executive assuming office and formulating policies and implementing them, we are not a part of that. Pure and simple. And that is the phase that people are criticizing. But we are not part of that. We did not abdicate responsibility because I've said that we even struggled to have an agency for sustainable socio-economic development. We would have tapped all the expertise in the country. But that had not actually happened. So essentially then, what is happening is the executive implementing its policies. That's why we are not taking responsibility for that.
Dr. Ismaila, the same from Mohammed Tex. Like you, I am a firm believer of the principles of collective responsibility in a group's commissions and omissions during the course of executing its responsibilities. Differently, in further dissecting the course or courses of a problem for meaningful lessons to be learned, recognition must be made on who championed the failures that have been registered for the purposes of self-evaluation. In the case of Coalition 2016, who do you think should be the champion and why?
The champion for what?
Failures of Coalition 2016.
Well, I wouldn't call them champion of failures. I wouldn't call them champion of failures. What I have always said I'm arguing is that the coalition had two objectives, strategic objectives, as explicitly written in the coalition agreement. That one is to effect regime change through peaceful means, and second, create the enabling environment to have elections in a level playing field. They succeeded in one, effecting regime change, but the second one did not happen. So I wouldn't call them champions of failure. I would say that there were weaknesses, there were failures, and the agenda that was promised did not come to fruition.
Now, I'll ask this question to you. A senior journalist person just texted me this to say, want both of you to answer this question, by the way, but we'll start with Honorable. Says, you both have very interesting ideas, but will you be willing to work together on behalf of the Gambian people? That is DOI and Citizens Alliance. Honorable Sallah?
Well, we have said that all forces that are interested in system change must work together to save the Gambia. That's what we have said. It is left for Citizen Alliance to define itself. But for us, we want to eradicate poverty. We want to eradicate injustice. We want to eradicate ignorance. How to get wealth to that poor farmer, to eradicate the poverty of that farmer, to that young student finishing school at GTTI to come and have a productive base to work. That woman who wants to sell does not have any means to do so. How to get wealth to that person so that they can produce is fundamentally our objective. This is not centrally planned. It is not talking about the state owning the land. It is saying the people owning the land. It's to give fertilizer, seed, farming implements to those people. It is saying that that person who owns the milling machine is a person owning the milling machine and processing. That person owning the shop is the person owning the shop and using it to sell to earn an income. That is what we are talking about. That a state like Gambia, you need a cooperative financial system that will not charge interest on that farmer, interest on that person, young person coming from school, interest on that woman who wishes to sell. interest will disappear. What is important is a revolving fund to make those people productive. If CA definitely is seeing Gambia in that light, well, obviously, we are evolving to become partners. The other elements of the private sector, there is no country in this world that will not encourage a private sector. What DOI is in fact saying is that the private sector in the Gambia should be linked to the private sector of Africa so that we can build up the base rather than waiting for oil companies from other lands to come and invest in our oil resources. South Africa may have the potential, Egypt may have, all these countries may have the potential to be able to come up through an African investment bank, to build the companies that will be able to harness our resources. This is what we are talking about.
Thank you, Dr. Ceesay.
Convergence of agenda between DOI and CA. And what is that? That we need to ensure we make the right policy, social policy investments so our people can live in dignity. So our young people can have jobs, decent jobs that pay so they can live in their country in dignity, so that our hospitals are well staffed and well equipped, and there is health care where you are scheme where every Gambian who needs medical care gets it affordable, so that there is enough electricity, there is enough water for our people so they don't have to drink well water or fetch water but in their own homes. So there is the basics. That's what we want. Now, how we go about it, how we create the world to really fund those social projects, that is where there's a bit of a difference, but I don't think the differences are so rigid that we are not able to make a compromise. But like I said, it's politics. What is important is that the agenda...
Closing statements by both, 5 minutes. We will also let both of you choose a language of your choice to make as some sort of a summary of the discussion and your ideas, and you may choose Wolof or Mandinka for both of you. But before we get to that, there's so many questions are coming in, but let us please remind everyone, this is a beginning. We cannot exhaust everything in a single debate. So we will therefore will have to bring this to an end sooner or later. They've been standing for 2 hours, and definitely we cannot be here all night. But Honorable Sallah, I'll start with you. This one says there is a pool of educated Gambians everywhere in the world. Would you, as a president, as a presidential candidate, as a political party, consider tapping into that wealth of knowledge for growth for Gambia?
Well, that's precisely so. That is what was recommended to this government, to create an agency for sustainable socio-economic development, to create an expert bank. We have emphasized that we must create an expert bank, create a database for every Gambian who has something to contribute to be featured in that database. They will be the people that you can put together to develop your public sector, to develop your private sector, to develop your cooperative sector, to develop your informal sector. These 4 sectors must be developed in any economy in developing countries before you can eradicate poverty. And our people do not only have the capacity in terms of technical knowledge, but they may also have the financial resources to invest. So you must be able to pool them together and pool them so that strategically you can take them to the sectors where they can invest and facilitate the productive development of our economy.
Doctor, same question.
Yes, of course. We believe that the diaspora has the power in terms of knowledge and wealth. And within CA, one of our vision is to tap into that wealth and power. Therefore, when the current government went to Brussels to attend the so-called donors conference to get money, I think it should have also been accompanied with a brain conference to also attract Gambians who are working abroad in very different institutions, in very many different sectors and fields with big expertise to come and help build this country. So we're open to that.
Last question, really, I'll have to bring this to an end sooner. The inequality in the Gambia is so apparent, Honorable Sallah, particularly between rural and urban Gambia. What would you do to bring about development to Gambians and some sort of equality?
Well, we have mentioned that there is no single village where you will find sovereign wealth. Every village is dependent. And they can be productive sectors, where if you have a land that can be the village land, the cooperative bank will give them seed fertilizer farming implement to produce, and it goes into the village treasury for the buying of milling machines, etc. If they have a sort of a pond, you can transform it into aquaculture so that they can earn and put it in the village treasury for the provision of the things that you need, infrastructure that you need in the village. The village, as a productive unit, provided funds by the cooperative bank, will enable each family farm to earn enough to be able to invest in infrastructure, in proper housing in the village setup, so that you will have housing schemes that will be devoted to the villages, and consequently that will upgrade the development of the villages. Not only that, look at what is happening in Katong, Patokong, Kusanyang. You are mining, but there is no percentage that is retained for the village. You must have a memorandum of understanding and an agreement that will ensure that a given percentage will go to the village. Royalties will be paid by all the NAWEC poles, Gamtel poles, and other poles that you put in villages to be able to sell electricity, sell credit, in order to ensure that each village has earning capacity to be able to provide the services that the village needs. So there is absolutely no doubt that the law of balanced and proportionate development must be implemented to the full, where the urban area will develop side by side with the rural area. That's why we're talking about the civil service reform, is to augment salary on the basis of the quantity and quality of work done. But you can only do that by enhancing the earning of sovereign national wealth. And if you do that, then the housing system, you can have civil servants having built housing system for them, they can be earning and paying to own the houses. That's how we intend to change the social.
How do you address inequality?
Just to pick up from him, yes, enhance sovereign national wealth, even though maybe perhaps differently, and invest it in social projects. For example, one of the reasons why there is so much inequality today, because there are no equal opportunities in this country. Education, there is no equality in education. Educational provision and access, is there's no quality, it's not also equal. It means that a child born in Kololi gets access to more quality education than a child born in Kolior. So we are going to make sure that we really have interventions that can ensure that every child born in this country has equal opportunities by investing in quality education for every part of this country, and also by coming up with interventions to really remove or to blur to some extent the rural-urban dichotomy by reversing development, by coming up with housing projects. Likewise, we are going to build 100,000 homes, which will be in the rural areas, making sure that young people have jobs by providing skills training and building their capacities. Because once you provide people with jobs and they are paid well, you increase standards of living. When you increase standards of living, you build a bigger middle class, wealth is created more, and then that wealth is invested back into the people. And in the short to medium term, you don't eradicate equality totally, but at least you balance the country in a way whereby at least every Gambian has access to the most basic needs and lives a dignified life.
We cannot thank enough Mr. Saul Fraser and Global Properties for agreeing to facilitate this debate today financially. And we want to say thank you to him and his company. And we want to encourage the private sector to support such initiatives. We all learn out of it. And our democracy can only grow by the exchange of ideas. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. Our politics will not change if you continue drumming Saurba and Baramasendeng and eating Benachin. It's the battle of ideas, it's policies, it's engaging with the public that will bring the change that we desire. A lot of young people have been registered this year. I am very proud that a lot of young people are now taking part in the process. We have to take responsibility. We have to own our country, and I think our young people need to be majorly commended for that. I've seen a lot registering. Now, Honorable Sallah, you have 5 minutes. You can make points, you can make emphasis, you can make closing statement in English.
On the 21st of January, the former president left the country. But on the 20th, not a single soul was in the street. The country was a desert, hanging on the balance of probability. I remember going to where President Barrow resides, and we were anticipating anything on that day because it was the final day. Either ECOMIC will come by force and bombs would have destroyed the State House and the bunkers that are there would explode, the hospital close by, the whole of Banjul would have been in flame. And it is now incredible that at that material time, many Gambians were calling for that to happen, not knowing what the implications would be. But we kept a steady course, guided ECOMIC, ensured that the security forces in the country were united under the president, under the republic, to facilitate the entry of ECOMIC as a solidarity force rather than a force of intervention. That is how Gambia welcomed President Adama Barrow at the airport, and thousands, tens of thousands of people celebrated his coming and took him to his residence. We achieved that as a Gambian people. The next phase is for us to remain united, to know that our enemy now is poverty. Our enemy now is ignorance. Our enemy now is injustice. We are capable of putting that to an end. We are going to die. What legacy are we going to leave behind for our children and children's children? Are we going to continue to clap for politicians because of words? Or are we going to listen very carefully, thoughtfully, to gather ideas that will enable us to make informed choice? What is the purpose of this discourse? It is to help each of us to take ownership of our minds, to know that we are sovereign, to know that we own this country. And because we are sovereign, we are the decision makers. And therefore, this country will sink if we don't think and take the right decisions. It will float if we think and make the right decisions. This is the starting point of the battle of ideas. It must not be seen as battle of individuals. Ideas can be exchanged. I heard Dr. Ceesay mention sovereign national wealth.
2 minutes, sir.
I believe that is what they also wish to rely on to fight poverty. I don't see how we can fight poverty in any other way, through loans, grants, and taxes. We must harness our sovereign national wealth that belongs to all the people. The question is, how are we going to distribute it to be able to eradicate poverty? The debate will continue on that score.
Before I give Dr. Ceesay the floor, I'd like to thank very much iAfrica TV for partnering with us here today and providing the screen. I'd like to also thank Gambia Music Store for providing the sound system and the lights. I'd like to thank Kir Fatu Network, Gambia Talents, Guy Nako, and all of the media here today. This is in fact our debate. This in fact is the new beginning. And the only winners today is the Gambian media and the Gambian public. Dr. Ceesay, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Haruna. Our people have suffered for far too long. Since gaining independence in 1965 from Great Britain, we have not been able to build a country where every Gambian citizen will live a dignified life. We are not able to feed our people. We are not able to care our people when they are sick. We are not able to give our children quality, relevant education where they can have mastery and compete in the global stage. We are not even able to give our people clean water, let alone clean or cheap electricity. We are not able to build good roads. We've not done anything for ourselves. The time has come for us to change and transform this country. I agree with Honorable that we need to unite. The Mandinka is not the enemy of the Wolof. The Fula is not the enemy of the Jola. Do is not the enemy of CA. UDP is not the enemy of NPP. The Christian is not the enemy of the Muslim. We have a common enemy, all of us. Whether you are Doi, whether you are CA, whether you are Manjago or Mandinka, whether you are a Christian or Muslim, whether you are a nationalist, a communist, whether you are a monarchist, we all have a common enemy in this country. We've not been able to fight and win against this common enemy because we've not been united. And our differences have always been out there. What is that common enemy? Poverty, disease, bad roads, lack of education. And until we unite, this enemy will stay and it will defeat us. In 1965, Gambians made a very difficult decision whether to vote and leave the British Empire or to stay within the orbit of the British Empire. Nobody believed in the potential of the Gambia to exist as an independent nation. They said it was not a viable country. And in fact, it was called the birth of an improbable nation. Yet, we persisted, we made it. We gained independence. We were tested in 1981, we made it. In 94, we were tested again, we made it, and in 2016. We are more hopeful that if we can vote to get independence in 1965, under difficult circumstances, and vote to bring democracy and the rule of law in 2016 under difficult circumstances, I see no reason why we cannot go back to the polls in 2021 and vote to bring development to this country. Because our independence and democracy is meaningless if it is not accompanied by development. Now is the time for us to put our differences aside and work for this country. It takes one generation to build the country for the next generation. We have to build the country for the next generation. It is projected that we will be 5 million people in 2050. To build a country for 5 million people starts now. What jobs will we create for them? What jobs will exist in 2050? What kind of roads do we want to build in 2050? How much energy do we need, and how do we generate that energy in 2050? How do we ensure in 2050 where there is energy security, there is food security, there are global challenges, climate change? We all see what's happening. How do we bring climate resilient societies? How do we adapt to climate change and build a country so the next generation that will come and find a country where they can live in dignity and not make a decision to die at sea and stay in their country? Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Adam, I saw you dozing there for a minute. I was wondering what happened to the sound. But I'm glad we're here. One of our sponsors is the Forbes Academy. If any of us here are wondering why and how these two honorable gentlemen are able to deliver such powerful speeches and arguments in public speaking, you ought to see Pastor Forbes, and he is a wonderful trainer in public speaking. He's one of our sponsors tonight. Honorable Sallah, you have 5 minutes, Mandinka, Manjago, Jola, Wolof, but any local language to address the general public on any points you wish. It could be on Coalition 2016, or it could be addressing a general point that the public needs to be aware of. 5 minutes, sir.
Bankuding yamu kangolet. Bankuding yamu sembolet. Kango ning sembo. Naman taratunting londole kang. Fahamurele kang. Akatinyaro nat. Mengye Gambia batandi. Wale mu balangot. Katonya je nyala ye balang. Ya soso. Ye dung ding kokon. Wale ya kendi mol meta ka wulu bata kono. Ka mem bata kono. Ka keba ya bata kono. Ka fa bata kono. Kele dindingol tu bata kono. Ye mem bata kono. Keba bata kono. Fa bata kono. Mamare gol wonyo. Ela bal wala nafali. Wala nyan badna. Ate ban nola londo kon. Ate ban nola tonya kon. Ate bang nola kambengo koma. Banko wuluta wole kan. Pour nga ke kilinti. Gambia dingol be ye ke kilinti. Killing mam fess ya kilinti. Bawo killing killing carte que c'est killing wala bebe. E ka wala karfa pour le président o tombo. Ya karfa pour que député tombo, councilor tombo. Wala mu toñat. Woto ntel bele nyanta sila ka crossroad. Musilo le nyanta tamala pour que foire ya bay. Musilo le nyanta tamala pour que tilimbale ya bay. Musilo le nyanta tamala pour que fahamu bale ya bay. Ni nga wasilo lon doron la tamala doron yirwobe sabatila dahabe sabatila mo bebe dahala nyim banko kan al nimbara liñu wone moy ne pour nek doomi rew lamu laaj moy bat doomi rew ya bat la doomi rew ya doole la doole boo xam ne suñ jiitalul xel mu nekk neen ñun ñëpp xam nañ ne doole ak baat soo ko wéerul ci dëgg mu nekk neen soo ko wéerul ci xam-xam mu nekk neen soo ko wéerul ci ànd mu nekk neen bon nag ñun doomi Gambie dañu war a ànd topp dëgg sàkku xam-xam pour xam dëgg gi suñu deful loolu dinañ continuer di judd ci coono di màggee ci coono di màgget ci coono di dee ci coono doom ci coono dee ci coono sët ci coono dee ci coono lim laaj mooy ñu xam ne ñun ñoo moom réew mi xeet goo mun a jógee diine goo mun a jógee foo mun a jógee fekk doomi Gambie nga yaa ñëpp a yem mu mel nag émo boobu li mu laaj mooy boole suñu doole yi wante foog ñu jiital suñu xel yi bon nag suñu toggin ci réew mi tey li mu laaj ku nekk ci ñun laaj boppam ban yoon lañ war a jaar pour dàq ndóol dàq coono dàq réer dàq noteel suñu demee bi gis yoon woowu ñu jaar ci rek coono jeex na ndóol jeex na noteel jeex na réer jeex na ñu mun a tedd ci kaw suuf nit loolu la moom rab moom judd ci coono ba dee ci coono nit mooy ñàkk a tedd loolu la ñu moom nañ aw ci yooni nit ñun ñëpp ñu mën a mucc jërë leen jëf ci déglu
jërëjëf Honorable Sallah, Dr. Ismaila, Manjago, Jola, Serir, Olof, 5 minutes.
Barka bake Haruna mbe tentula mbe jayla kato minke kaje ko nyin kacha e soto nyin kacha do muna sabu muna daliloti wolon pour nga na jang kacha nga jube mbe banko mba tamandi la nyaadi la banko la na fulo mba do ko la nyaadi la ni nga do ko nga ke banko dingol kan pour ka bata bay e sa banko dio banko ding e si sabatino Gambia bankon kan foroya kono anin horomo kono anin buña kono gambari ngo meta batala kabari ngam fan soto fo sañ muka ku kenon fayye na molla jolman si ikara sate dolto molman jio soto la suul kono gi senango tije molman kurango soto l'hôpitanol man soto silol man beteya sañelolo wo molle ka cartel fayye Sénégal batata la seno mi nafa funding kelman do ko soto bari sanjilolo kana carte tanka fay oto meta carte fayola le baw ni la carte mi nafa baw mi yalon ko wala ka jiyo sabab ji senango anin kurango anin l'hôpitanol anin sila kendol anin do ko pour funding kel carte le kawo sababu to nin carte ma wo finan oto na carte fayo hani kabi aman nafa soto oto sañ wato sitale pour nga kuning nga ñaayele nga na moy politicien la miyalon ko wala si ferol fenan ferol miyalon ko wala si Gambia bondi batakono balu day soneya fondinke do ko soto momo sasare se jarebe damen ndingole karango miyalon ka abetiata le isaje asina fa o wato le kana siten mais o so ka ñaadile nga kambeng nga si fatam fanso bay fatam fansi nga bay o donne si karos batino Gambia bankun kan on be mo be tentula mbal jeyla ka foko nimu kacadri kacami alon ka kumada bake ni monada bi ako aliya karafa bankola aka nyinin ka kudantan lalla ako alin karafa la jata kende ala alla balu aldingola karango alla silo bawo nafulo min ka doku ani min ka kaji akatara telebulu woto wato sita ning mo monata aya nyinin ka bankola ala nyinin ka ku sabala itolon jumadi ya jiko sotole bang ya bala fara soto le bang ya hino soto le bang ni mo soto de banko di lela ni ko daje il munati ne dunta politiko kono podun ka banko di ngol na falam bang fo kete fo ngona fa sabanjango ilafta ka muneke fere ju malle betebul ba politiko mu ferolati nin question sabol amari ma jabeno anyama oto mo mi alon ko mandana kan carte di la bari ba jabela nyaali le wolon ko nin kata sifal politicien yana lo gambe di ngol nyaato ka fo ilafta ka banko samba nyaadi le abuko bi dara do ko ñola rek ina ye interview ya fo be do ko kala nyaadi le ani munela expertise ti dandi be do ko dile la or memo be tentula mbal jayla bake fang and se wota bake. Do you have another 2 minutes for Wolof?
I think we will provide it. You used only one of your 2 minutes, so you had an excess 2 minutes. You can have it now.
jërëjëf suma mbokk yi di leen sant di leen gërëm di gërëm Haruna mi nga xam ne moom moo waral jotaay gi tey jotaay bi am solo sax ñëw toog fii ñëw waxtaan ñun mi nga xam ne ñun ñooy politiciens yi bugg a dem si doomi réew di ne dénka leen ñu réew ku la wax nga dénka ko réew nag am na lu mu la wax mooy dénk ma sa dunda sa wér gu yaram sa doom yi seen jànga seen yoon yi ndox ak courant ak seen kaaraange kon kooku balaa nga ko dénk réew war nga seetaat kooku mooy kan ndax am na jikko ji ndax am na pas-pas bi ndax am na éene bi ak yërmande bi pour ñu dénk ko réew xam-xam moom waaw mën nañoo laaj waaye soo amee xam-xam nag amuloo yërmande sa xam-xam amul njëriñ nga am xam-xam amuloo yar amuloo teegin sa xam-xam amul njëriñ nga am xam-xam amuloo yërmande sa xam amul njëriñ kon foog ñu seet jikko yooyu noonu ñu tënka ko ñu xam ndax kii mat naa dénk réew ñaare bi mooy lan mooy sa pas-pas lan nga bëgg a def lan moo tax nga dugg si politique pour njëriñ askan bi la ndax pour njëriñ sa boppa ñetteel bi yan jéego nga bëgg a jël yan pexe parce que politique mooy pexe yi lan naka ngaa liggéey koom-koomi réew mi pour nga jël ko nga def ko si doomi réew mi pour gis ne képp ko xam ne yaa ngi si biir réew mi sa lépp mot ndaw yi am xëy fu ñoo xëyee seen xëy njëriñ leen ku feebar ñu mun laa faj foo nekka ñëpp am ndox bu set bu sell la am courant bu set bu sellate yomba yoon yi baax suñ domi mun a jànga loolu lañ bëgg a biir Gambia fii kaaraange am soo nekkee sa kër wala si biti di nga xam ne kenn du ñu dal sa kaw gaañ la wala jël sa alal pour ñu am nag am loolu nag foog ñu mën koo nekk benn wax naa ko fi si angale te xaajala bi bari na surtout si mbiri xeet du yóbbu réew fenn daf di yaaxa réew te joolaa bi du nooni olof bi soose bi du nooni saraxulle bi te ñun ñëpp benn leen ñoo nekk benn ñu nekk Gambia soo génnee olof bi Gambia nekkaatut Gambia dafa des soo génnee beneen xeet tamit nekkaatut Gambia kon ñu nekk benn waaw gis-gisi politique nag munta nekk benn waaye lu gën a am solo mooy benn Gambia lañ gis pour gis ne ñu liggéey réew mi su ko defee képp koo xam ne yaa ngi fi nga di kafe si ngor di kafe si taranga su boobaa suñ ndaw yi am xëy duñu wax nañu dee si géej moo leen gënal dal ñu toog seen dikka kon di leen jaajëfal di ñaan nag di ñaax ne waxtaan gi bu mu fi am ñu ñëw di waxtaan ak askan wi ñu gën a waxtaan ñu xam képp ku nekk lan mooy sa pexe lan mooy say jéegoy politique lan mooy say gis-gis suba su ko defee ñu mën a tànn politiciens yoo xam ne ñu mën a defar réew bi.
Ismaila ñaari yëf nga boole ñaari yëf du doy waar nga boole ab jàngalekat ak politicien loolu foo ko boolee rek moom waaye di leen jaajëfal bu baax kontaan nañ torop waaye nag di digg waa Gambia ne lii lañ fas yéene dinañ fexe ñu woo yeneen kilifa yu nekk ci yeneen parti ñoom it ñuy jàkkaarloo di waxtaan waaye waxtaan booba nuñ koo teralee mooy ne dañoo xool ne tey de li ñoo waxtaan mooy mbéy mi ñu indi ñaar ñu wax seen xel ak xalaat ci loolu buñ jógee ci loolu ñu am beneen waxtaan boo xam ne comme laa doon ñu waxtaanee loolu di wax borom parti yi yépp nag fukk ak juróom-ñett yi yépp ne na ngeen pare nañ fugga seen bunte yi pour ñëpp ñëw liñ fi def tey doorte la ñëpp mënuñoo bokk ñëw fii waxtaan bi nu mu yànjee nii nu mu neexee nii nu mu jaare yoon nii parce que ñaari nit rek la buñ fi indi woon ñaar fukki nit kenn du déggante loolu moo tax nag te waxtaani tey bi ñoom seen boppa ñoo ko sumba man sob moo ma ci boole docteur dafa wax waxam wér géejam géeja boobu noonu keeks boo ko wéeri mu ne ko déet wooyal say kilifa ma waxtaan ak ñoom ma ne lii ñu gars yi di waxtaan nii de moom xaaral ma dem foofu toog si diggante bi aate waaye kenn rek moo gañe tey mooy Gambia te lii lañ bëgg lii lañ nemoon suñu réew ñuy mun a waxtaan ñun yépp kenn du yuxu sa morom kenn du tàccu sa morom kenn du saaga sa morom te defe naa loolu am nañ ko fi tey di leen jaajëfal yéen yépp kàddu yi rafet nañ xel yi rafet nañ kon lii sax waxtaan la woon te waxtaan bi ànd ak teey yar ak teggin wane ngeen loolu di leen ñaanal yéen ñaari kilifa yu teew fii tey ne leen ne mat ngeen ay kilifa nii laa def kon donc di leen jaajëfal di jaajëfal seen parti yi parce que bu parti yi nanguloon xëy na doo leen fi mën a ñëw tey ba ñëw am waxtaan bi di ñaan yeneen parti yi nag da bu ñu fogee bunte yi nañ nangu ngel la bépp politicien bu nekk ci réewi Gambie nga ne yow mënoo toog jàkkaarloog sa morom ngeen waxtaan bala kenn sànnil karta parce que jamono boobu dafa weesu man awma benn intérêt politique bokkuma ci benn political party Gambia ma ñor waaye Gambia bu ñu ñor nag kim ñor ni ñun war ngaa am sañ-sañu ñëw jaay sa marchandise ñun doomi Gambie ñu jënd sa marchandise loolu la ñoo ñaan di leen jërëjëfal honorable Halifa Sallah di la wax jërëjëf bu baax di la ñaanal yàlla wér ak wérle ak gudda fan ñun yëpp ñu ngi taataan ci yow di jàngee ci yow di royee ci yow ma wax leen na fii 1995 buñ toogee 96 ñu ne nguuri sordaar la maa ngi nekk xale bu ndaw di liggéey Radio 1 American Embassy indi ay xaalis ndaxam ma xaw ma woon dara sax waaye ñu tànnoon ma ne dangaa liggéey ak Halifa Sallah ak Patient Sonko Godwin moom la woon ñu ñëw Radio 1 FM ñuy wax ci référendum bi jógee foofu wax ci constitution bu ees bi te loolu li ma ci jàngee woon bari na torop Dr.Ismaila Cessay mii bu ma tàmbalee Paradise TV yow laa njëkk a oo ne la kaay nga toog ak ñun ñuy waxtaani politique ndeke yow yaa ngi doon ut nguur sa di ut réew bi man xaw ma ci woon dara waaye man nag di taataan si yow di jàngee si yow ñu def suñ cambia politico di askan gi kon nag yéen ñaari kilifa yii nii boo la ñëwee fii ngeen waxtaan nii rek laa mën a mel di leen wax jërëjëf Ceesay di la ñaanal wér ak wérle di la ñaanal gudda fan ak nga yàgga suñ kanam yéen ñaar ku ci am réew mi ànd nañoo yow jërëjëf. Let's take a picture in the middle. Let's take a picture in the middle. kontaan naa torop jërëjëf